Hello, my lovelies of Tumblr. It's November 18th, and that means Harry Potter comes out tonight, as I'm sure you're all aware by everything that has been posted all over Tumblr for the last... I was about to say the last week, but it's really been like the last month or two or three or four. And of course this means Deathly Hallows Part 1. We're one step closer to the end. We are at the beginning of the end of an era. And for me, like so many other people, these books really define my life. I mean, I'm freaking out today, as my posts have demonstrated. If people don't stop posting Hedwig's theme, I'm gonna like throw my computer across the room, because every time it's played, I tear up severely. And my roommates both hate Harry Potter, so they don't quite understand. I'm actually going to see the movie at 3:30 in the morning because I'm lazy and didn't buy the tickets for midnight in time. So me and my three friends are seeing it at 3:30 a.m. Dedication. But we were talking about this last night, and my one roommate who lived over there in the single bed was asking us why in the world we would ever want to see a movie at 3 in the morning, and that she couldn't be paid enough to see any Harry Potter movie, and that she'd never read the books. And I said, well, I've read all of them 7 times each. Which is kind of a lie, because I've only read 1 through 4 7 times each, and I read 5 twice, and 6 once, and 7 I cried my way through in one night. But whatever, I've read them all 7 times each. And she was like, oh my god, you could never get me to read a book more than once, and I don't like reading that much, and I like to read Gossip Girl. I'll never understand people who don't like to read. Ever. Never understand it. But anyway, there's a reason I am making this video right now, and it's not just to jabber about how excited I am, or about how I'm gonna cry and could cry at any moment, or to take up time because I'm bored and it's almost 4 o'clock and I really don't want to work on my paper on John Audubon. How am I supposed to write a 10-page paper on John James Audubon? But anyway, and I have to present a 12-minute presentation, and it's going to be a disaster. But anyway, so the reason I'm making this video, my Tumblr friends, is because I have with me right here a book that should be very familiar to all of you. Harry Potter and the Sorcerer's Stone. Because I'm very diligently attempting to reread the entire series. And by diligently attempting to read the entire series, I mean I've been trying to get through this book since I got to school. Well, almost since I got to school. I didn't bring it with me right away. But I've been trying to reread it for a long time. But I'm an English major, so I've got a ton of stuff to read. But anyway, I've been trying to get through this book for the 8th time for a while. And I just thought it would be rather appropriate on the day that Deathly Hallows Part 1 comes out if somebody took a moment to bring us all back to that first time we opened these books. For some of us, a very long time ago. For me, when I was 10 years old. And so that was 8 years ago. Almost 9 years ago. I can't even believe it. And for some of us, maybe it wasn't too long ago, but I'm sure we all very vividly remember the first time we picked these books up. I actually, one more brief little story before I get to the reading. I didn't want to read Harry Potter. All my friends were getting into it, and I thought it was dumb. I was into my American Girl doll books, and I read a lot of biographies too. I was kind of a strange child. Biographies and American Girl mysteries. But anyway, I didn't want to read these books. My friends were becoming obsessed, and they weren't really my friends. They were kind of mean kids. I didn't have many friends in elementary school. But this was like 3rd or 4th grade, maybe 4th, 5th, something like that. I'm really bad with dates. But I didn't want to get into these books. and I would just rant about them, like, all my friends, that's all they'll talk about is Harry Potter, and I don't want to watch these books, or, wow, read these books. And my dad said to me, you can't, and something I'm going to hold with me my whole life, I think, you can't say you hate something that you haven't experienced. You have to, how can you argue with people if you don't have any background, if you don't know where they're coming from? So he said, I think you should just try reading the books, and I resisted it for a long time. But one day we were in Barnes & Noble. He used to take me there, me and my sister, there every week after church. We used to go to Barnes & Noble for a few hours. And he said, why don't you try reading? And I was bothering him. I was bored or something. And he said, why don't you try reading the Harry Potter books? And I was like, no. But I really kind of wanted to. You know, I was curious. I was just putting up a fight. And I did. And I sat down. I didn't even have a chair to sit down on. I think I sat down on, like, the edge of a shelf and picked up this book. Actually, not this exact copy. My first copy was a soft cover. And it's at home, placed very honorably on a shelf, because if I touched it, it would probably fall apart. This is a copy we got from the library that they were getting rid of, so it's all nice and durable. But I sat down and I started reading it, and I think I got through a chapter and a half before my dad came over and said it was time to go, and I said I wasn't leaving without this book. And it was the beginning of a beautiful thing. If it weren't for Harry Potter, I wouldn't be an English major. I wouldn't want to write. I wouldn't have so many wonderful friends that I do. I wouldn't be the same person if it weren't for that. If it weren't for this book and this first page. So, I think it's time to take a trip back and read this first part of Harry Potter. I'm going to do it in a typical kindergarten style, so I'm going to read you the title and who wrote it, and just so you're aware. So, Harry Potter and the Sorcerer's Stone by J.K. Rowling. Chapter 1, The Boy Who Lived. Mr. and Mrs. Dursley of No. 4 Privet Drive were proud to say that they were perfectly normal, thank you very much. They were the last people you'd expect to be involved in anything strange or mysterious, because they just didn't hold with such nonsense. Mr. Dursley was the director of a firm called Grunnings, which made drills. He was a big, beefy man with hardly any neck, although he did have a very large mustache. Mrs. Dursley was thin and blonde, and had nearly twice the usual amount of neck, which came in very useful, as she spent so much of her time craning over garden fences, spying on the neighbors. The Dursleys had a small son called Dudley, and in their opinion there was no finer boy anywhere. The Dursleys had everything they wanted, but they also had a secret, and their greatest fear was that somebody would discover it. They didn't think they could bear it if anyone found out about the Potters. Mrs. Potter was Mrs. Dursley's sister, but they hadn't met for several years. In fact, Mrs. Dursley pretended she didn't have a sister, because her sister and her good-for-nothing husband were as un-Dursleyish as it was possible to be. The Dursleys shuddered to think what the neighbors would say if the Potters arrived in the street. The Dursleys knew that the Potters had a small son, too, but they had never even seen him. This boy was another good reason for keeping the Potters away. They didn't want Dudley mixing with a child like that. When Mr. and Mrs. Dursley woke up on the dull, gray Tuesday morning our story starts, there was nothing about the cloudy sky outside to suggest that strange and mysterious things would soon be happening all over the country. Mr. Dursley hummed as he picked out his most boring tie for work, and Mrs. Dursley gossiped away happily as she wrestled a screaming Dudley into his high chair. None of them noticed a large, tawny owl flutter past the window. At 8:30, Mr. Dursley picked up his briefcase, pecked Mrs. Dursley on the cheek, and tried to kiss Dudley goodbye, but missed, because Dudley